Why the Buddha said, "No one can bless you but yourself." In translations of the suttas, they often call the Buddha the Blessed One. The question sometimes comes up, who blessed him? And the answer is, he blessed himself. He had asked himself, what did he really want in life? He realized that he wanted nothing less than the highest happiness. He also realized that if it was going to happen, he had to do it. He had to create the causes. The problem was that when he started out, he didn't know the causes. He tried various paths before he found the true path. When he had found the true path, he looked back and realized that the happiness he had found did come from his own actions. There was a path of action by which he blessed himself. Bless yourself. The canon describes the path of practice in so many ways because each of us is coming from a different place. Some of us have a lot of generosity in our background. Some of us tend to be more intelligent in a book-learning sort of way. Others have intelligence in other ways. Part of the Buddha's wisdom was realizing that he could take you from wherever you are, and if you followed his instructions, he could get you to where he was. This is what ties all the practices together. Not that they're coming from the same place, in the sense of the same starting point, but they do go to the same ending point, which means that for some people, if they're to the south of the goal, the instructions are to go north. For those people who are to the north of the goal, the instructions are to go south. You can understand how in practice, what sounds contradictory is actually not. So the question is, how do you find your path among the many paths the Buddha provided? Start by realizing, as he said, that they all come down to the Noble Eightfold Path. They're all just variations on this one path. This is another way in which they're all consistent. He taught, for instance, the 4 establishings of mindfulness. When he asks, how do you develop these establishings of mindfulness? The answer he gives is that you develop the all 8 factors of the path. There are people who say you can do mindfulness and as a result, gain wisdom and insight and awakening all without concentration practice. But as the Buddha said, if you want to develop mindfulness, you've got to develop concentration as well because it's part of the path. If you're simply mindful of what you should do but don't do anything about it, that doesn't take you anywhere. This is why the Buddha said there are extra qualities you have to add to mindfulness, like ardency and alertness. Alertness is knowing what you're doing while you're doing it. Ardency is wanting to do it well. In fact, the ardency is what makes all of these factors part of the right path. It's the wisdom factor of those 3. And you're ardent in doing what? Trying to get the mind to settle down. So as you're sitting here right now, try to be mindful of why you're here. Then focus on doing what you need to do. In some cases, we come to the meditation wired, tense, and nervous, so we have to emphasize getting the mind to settle down and be quiet. Other people come dull and listless to begin with, so they have to be energized. This is where there's a difference between someone coming from the north and someone coming from the south. So check your state of mind right now. Is it a northern state or a southern state? What do you need? More energy? If so, think about all the things that would motivate you to want to practice. Think about the fact that even though we have a new year coming on, we're getting older. We don't know how much time we have left, but we do know that we have this time right now, this breath coming in, this breath going out, and we can take advantage of that. This is one of the good things about the Buddha's teachings on meditation. They don't require a lot of background study, but they do require that you be really true in realizing that you need to do something good and that it can be done right here. So whatever way of thinking gives you energy, learn how to think in those ways, because thinking is an important part of meditation, especially when you need to be energized. If you're already fairly wired and need to calm down, think about topics that are soothing, like goodwill for all, or think about what a good Dhamma we have here, found by someone who wanted nothing but the highest happiness and held himself to the highest standards. Then, when he found that happiness, he taught it for free. Not only that, he would seek out people. If he sensed that people here or there would be ready for the teaching, he would go to them. He ended up walking all over northern India. Can you imagine anyone doing that now? Even on the very last day of his life, he knew there was one more person he had to teach. So even though he was suffering from dysentery, he walked all day to where that person was, taught him, and then passed away. That kind of reflection is calming. You realize that there are good people in the world who have left their goodness behind, along with instructions on how to become good like them. Those instructions have lasted more than 500 years. So let that thought calm you down, at the same time making you want to practice. This is a large part of the strength of persistence. Learning how to motivate yourself and figuring out what kind of motivation you need right now. The strength of persistence is part of a whole set of 5 strengths. There's conviction. Conviction that the Buddha really was awakened, that he taught the Dhamma well, and that there have been people who've practiced the Dhamma well and gotten results. That thought gives you energy. Otherwise, you live in a world where no one has found the end of suffering, one in which the Buddha had just a few interesting ideas that might be right, might be wrong. That's the kind of world it is if you don't have conviction in his awakening. It's a miserable world. But when you have the conviction that the Buddha was able to find a way to end suffering, and he was able to do it through his own efforts, that motivates you to want to put forth your own efforts so that you too can get the same results. And you realize, as I said, that you don't know how much time you have left, so you've got to keep these teachings in mind. Keep the need to develop skillful qualities in mind. Keep in mind the need to abandon unskillful ones all the time. That's how, when reflecting on the need for persistence, you see the need for mindfulness. That, too, is a strength. When mindfulness develops, it turns into concentration. The mind settles down with a sense of well-being, right here, solidly right here. It's thoughts about other things you've already put away, so you can stay focused right here. Your mind takes on so much work in the course of the day, dealing with this person, this duty, that duty, this job, and the body has its needs, or your emotions come up, and you have to deal with them. So many different things the mind has to deal with. It's good to be able to tell yourself, I don't need to even think about those things right now. I can stay right here. If my mind is going to deal well with those things, it needs to be cared for. It needs to be allowed to rest. In this way, it's like the body. When you hire people to do work, you don't expect them to work 24 hours a day because you realize the quality of the work will go down. So you give them a reasonable amount of work and then a reasonable amount of time to rest. The mind needs a reasonable amount of time to rest too. When I recommend to people that they meditate at least 2 hours a day, some people say, that's a huge chunk of time. But 2 hours out of 24, it's just barely enough to keep abreast of what you need to do. Often in those 2 hours, you have to clean out the mess that's been made during the other 22 hours. So realize that this is something you keep your mind focused on, not only while you're sitting here with your eyes closed, but also as you go through the day. The word for meditation in the Pali language, bhavana, doesn't mean just meditating with your eyes closed. It means to develop good qualities in the mind. And that's something you want to do all day long. Only when the mind settles down like this can it see things clearly. This is where your real strength lies, the strength of discernment, when you see clearly what you're doing, along with the results of what you're doing. Part of discernment is alertness on steroids. You're very clear about what your actions are. You see where you're causing yourself unnecessary suffering, and you can see how you can stop. Again, this is where ardency comes in. You remember what the Buddha said about how true happiness comes from letting go of anything that causes suffering. So you draw on your conviction in what the Buddha taught and you try to let go of the things that you see are causing. Now, if you didn't believe that letting go of those things would lead to a greater happiness, you wouldn't let go. There are people who think, as I said, that concentration is as good as things get, so you might as well hold on. But when you're convinced in what the Buddha said, and your conviction has been verified many times as you practice, as you're persistent in the practice, mindful, developing concentration, you build more and more trust in the Buddha that it really would be good to let go of things that are very dear to you inside. A lot of your attitudes, a lot of your sense of who you are. Once you see that these things are stressful, you can let them go. It's in this way that all the strengths come together in discernment. As the Buddha said, they're based on heedfulness, the realization that your actions really are important and you've got to be careful. But also, based on that heedfulness, once you develop conviction, you're more likely to be able to develop the discernment you need, the ability to let go of things that otherwise you wouldn't be able to let go. So think of all 5 of these strengths as working together. The Buddha's image is of a house. You put up the rafters, But the rafters are not really solid until the ridgepole is in place. They support the ridgepole, and the ridgepole is what makes them solid too. So think of all 5 strengths as working together. The first 4 support discernment, and discernment is what makes them solid. In this way, you find that you, too, can develop the strengths the Buddhas had. As he said, whenever he tried to master a path that was taught in those days, he tried to develop these 5 strengths, because it was through developing them that he was able to test them for sure, to see how far they went. When he found that they were lacking, he realized that the lack was not in him. The lack was in that particular path. When he got onto the right path again, he brought these same 5 qualities to bear, and in this case, they worked. He had conviction in the right thing. He made a persistent effort in the right way. He was mindful of the right things, concentrated in the right way, and gained discernment in the right way. All of these things worked together to bring him the happiness he had been searching for. He was able to prove for himself that, yes, through human effort, it is possible to find the highest happiness. He spent the rest of his life teaching that. The people who listened to him and benefited from practicing based on his teachings passed those teachings down to us. And here we are, with 1 more year to add to the life of the Buddha's teachings. What keeps them alive is not the fact that they exist in books on the shelves. They stay alive in our practice. So think of this as a good year to extend the life of the Buddha's teachings for 1 more year at least. As I said, we don't know how much more time we have left. As Ajahn Swat once said, the human realm is going to get pretty bad for a while. If, when you die, you have to come back as a diva, better than as a human being. After all, divas can practice too. And how are you going to get that opportunity? By practicing as much as you can right now. A woman once came to see Luang Pudun and said that she didn't want to practice meditation now because practicing under the current Buddha was really difficult. She was going to wait until the time of Maitreya, the next Buddha, when it said that people will find it a lot easier to practice. But as he told her, if you don't practice now, you're not going to get an opportunity to come back then. If you're lazy now, there's no opening for lazy people in the time of a Buddha like that. So think about time in whatever way it encourages you to practice right now. After all, where else and when else are you going to practice? This is the time. This is the place. So keep doing your best right here. That's how you bless yourself here and now. The passage we chanted just now on blessings and protection is one that people like to have chanted at their homes as a blessing for the house or a blessing on their birthdays. The irony is that many times when people ask for a blessing like that, they don't want to hear about aging, illness, and death. And yet the passage itself says that one way of protecting yourself, one way of blessing yourself, is to be heedful, to realize there are dangers in the world. The other passage we chanted, the 5 reflections, gives the impression that this is what the Buddha was thinking about as he left home. He saw that he was subject to aging, illness, and death, that all that he loved was going to be taken away from him. But at that point, the 5th reflection on karma was not yet confirmed. He had faith that maybe it would be possible through human effort to find a way to go beyond aging, illness, and death, beyond separation. And as he said, his quest was his quest for what was skillful. What kind of actions would be skillful in that direction? Then when he gained his awakening, he confirmed the fact that, yes, it is possible through our efforts to find something that doesn't age, doesn't grow ill, doesn't die, where there's no separation at all. Some people think of nibbana as the ultimate separation, but it's not. After all, samsara is not a place. Samsara is an activity, and it's an addictive activity by which we bump up against one another. There was one time I mentioned that it was translated as the wandering on, and someone said, it's more like the bumbling on. We keep on making mistakes. We have to live with our mistakes, sometimes learning from them, sometimes not, sometimes remembering the wrong things, like Talleyrand's comment about the Bourbon dynasty. After they'd been thrown out of France in the French Revolution, they came back in the Restoration after Napoleon was exiled. A lot of them wanted to settle old scores. As Talleyrand commented, they never forgot anything, but they never learned anything. Most of us are that way, but the Buddha found that there is a way out. We stop the wandering on, stop this addiction, And when you stop an addiction, it's not the case that you're separated from a place. You're freed from the bad consequences of that addiction. That's the path that the Buddha lays out. And as we're on the path, we have to realize that it's our most valuable possession as we go through this dangerous world. Some of the dangers are physical. The main dangers, though, the Buddha said, are the people who will try to teach you wrong view and try to get you to break your precepts. And those kinds of people are everywhere. But you have to realize, based on the Buddha's awakening, that he saw that our right view and our virtue can guarantee a good future for ourselves and a good future for those who follow our example. So those are the things you hold on to. Other things, he said, you can lose them, and it's not all that serious. But if you lose your right view and you lose your virtue, there's going to be a lot of suffering. These two qualities, he also said, lie at the basis of mindfulness practice. When you live a virtuous life and you reflect back on your actions, there's nothing you have to recoil from, nothing you have to hide from yourself. This, of course, makes it easier to remember what you've done in the past. You reflect back on the times when you weren't virtuous, and it doesn't hurt quite so much because you know you've changed your habits now. You can look back at your past mistakes and learn more from them. The mind isn't putting up walls, so it can search back in its memory to figure out what is skillful and what's not in line with right view. That's the kind of mindfulness that gives you a good solid foundation and gets the mind into concentration. So wherever you go, make sure that you maintain these two qualities. Virtue, right view. And the fortunate thing is that nobody can take them away from you. Someone once asked Ajahn Mun, "Can you separate a person's virtue from his or her mind?" He said no, and it's a good thing you can't separate them, because otherwise people would steal one another's virtues and leave you deprived. But once you've got virtue, it's really yours. The only way you lose it is if you yourself throw it away. If you're around people who would like to see you, for some reason or another, kill, steal, have illicit sex, lie, or take intoxicants, know that those are the people who are trying to destroy you, but you don't have to be destroyed by them. They can't take your virtue away from you. The same with right view. As long as you hold on to it, nobody can take it from you. So have a strong sense that these are your most valuable possessions, and they carry in their wake other good qualities as well. As the Buddha said, one of the corollaries of right view is wanting to have goodwill for all. He said one time that having ill will for anyone, seeing that ill will would be a good thing to have, would be wrong view. It's in this way that right view underlies your virtue, because you realize that you don't want to harm anybody. You don't want to do or say or think anything that would cause any harm, and that strengthens your virtue. So make sure that you hold on to these things. The Buddha also gives other lists of the treasures you can maintain that include virtue and the discernment of right view, along with other qualities that maintain these two. Things like conviction, a sense of shame, a sense of compunction, learning, and generosity. The sense of conviction, of course, means being convinced that the Buddha really did awaken to the truth, and he taught it in such a way that we can put what he taught into practice. He wasn't engaged in devious or complicated ways of explaining things that were unnecessarily obscure. As he admitted, there are some aspects of the way the mind works which are very complicated, but he was able to draw from them the basic principle that if you act on skillful intentions, the results will be good in the long term. If you act on unskillful intentions, they'll be bad in the long term. You've got to hold to that. As for shame and compunction, shame here is not the opposite of pride or self-esteem. It's the opposite of shamelessness, where you don't really care what other people think, and in particular, you don't care what the noble ones think. As the Buddha saw in his awakening, if you give credence to people who are not noble in their opinions, that can lead you to do unskillful things. So you keep in mind those who are noble, and you want to look good in their eyes. That's one of the ways the Buddha says that you maintain yourself in the practice. He calls it taking the world as a governing principle, lokadipateya. You remind yourself that there are people in the world who can read minds. What would they think if they were reading my mind when I'm thinking of giving up on the practice? You'd be ashamed to hold on to those thoughts. Then you realize that their concern for you is based on compassion, that they're not out there just judging you for the sake of judging you harshly. But they realize if you give up in the path, you're harming yourself, you're harming others, so they'd be concerned. So, out of a sense of love and conviction for these people, that these are the people who really do mean you well. You want to behave in a good way. The same with compunction. This is more a matter of your seeing for yourself that if you act on unskillful intentions, there's going to be harm down the line, so you just don't want to do it. It's your sense of conscience. It's the opposite of apathy, the opposite of callousness. This quality of compunction, too, is a treasure. As for learning, that strengthens your right view. Generosity is a way of showing your goodwill for others because it includes generosity not only with material things, but also with your forgiveness, with your knowledge, with your energy, with your time. This quality of generosity is so basic to the practice that when the Buddha was going to introduce the Four Noble Truths to anybody, he'd start with generosity. As he said, a person who's stingy can't even get into the right concentration, much less gain any awakening. So these are all qualities that strengthen you, that will protect you. These are blessings. Developing them is how you bless yourself. There's that tradition of referring to the Buddha as the Blessed One. Someone once asked, well, who blessed him? The answer is that he blessed himself. He found how to bring himself true happiness in such a way that he wasn't the only one who benefited. The blessings spread around. In the same way, when you bless yourself with these genuine treasures, these genuine valuables, virtue and right view, you're blessing yourself, and the people around you get blessed too. We live in a world where there's so much danger. The other day, I was sweeping around the sala and looked out across the valley. It was one of those days when everything was nice and green and fresh. It looked so peaceful. Yet back in the background, there was the noise of the artillery in the nearby military base. Or like tonight with the helicopters, to remind you that even though we've found a peaceful corner here, we live in a world where there's a lot of danger lurking behind the surface. But don't see physical dangers as the worst. The danger of losing your true valuables. That's what you've got to watch out for. So be heedful. You've got something good here to maintain that no one can take away from you. Make sure you don't throw it away, and don't allow anybody out there to tell you otherwise. They can tell you, but don't let them have any influence over you. That's where you have to stand firm.